everybody. It's Rob again. It's time for another member talk, and this one is super exciting. We have got some friends of ours that have been very inspirational to us as a show of member talks. Actually helped us get started. I want to introduce you guys. Most people know you, but Brian Waters and Ryan Ballard from Undertaking the Podcast on Member Talks, a collaboration show. Hey guys, what's up?
Hi, Rob. Happy to be here.
I am excited for this one. I really am.
Look at Rob.
Hey, appreciate the opportunity, man. It's a great opportunity and always a good time, always a good laugh with you, buddy.
Well, it was exciting. I was sitting at home just before we got on to do this, and I was actually thinking of you guys because I was actually thinking about the first time we really met. And it was out in front of a bratwurst stand in Leavenworth, Washington. And I'm actually sitting at my counter eating bratwurst with sauerkraut and hot mustard. And I'm like, is this ironic or what? I mean, this is going to be a great show.
Those were good times.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. It's been exciting to kind of hang with you guys over the last year and a half.
Say it again. What'd you say, Rob?
I said, I've really enjoyed getting to know you guys and hanging out with you, by phone and things like that over the last year and a half. You guys have been very inspirational to us as far as getting us out into a podcast format. And so it's been,
Rob, let me say this. You guys gave us an opportunity. So we appreciate you guys. We appreciate what you guys do for the association. We also appreciate the idea that you've got people that are willing to support your association. You're engaged with what's going on. There's obviously new things going on within your state when it comes to funeral service, as well as other states. Your state was kind of a trailblazer with some things. And when it comes to, what is it called? It's not human composting. Natural organic reduction.
Yeah.
Sorry. I want to get the term right. Natural organic reduction. So, you were able to enlighten us on some things and honestly kind of walk us through that as that's something that's kind of coming to fruition. So that's for us, man, you gave us an opportunity. We had a great time. We stayed out there, I think 6 days, and it was amazing. You guys really treated us well, and we appreciate it. We really do. Brian?
Well, I mean, Rob, yeah, we definitely have to, give you our thanks because when we started this show, Undertaking the Podcast, we had no idea where this thing was going to go. And we started it. We had no plan. We had really very little information about how a podcast works and what we should expect. And within the first month, I received a phone call from you, Rob Goff. And I was working a visitation that night, and I got this phone call from Washington State, and I looked at my people, and I said, I got to take this. And I walked out and answered the phone, and you said, would you guys be willing to come out to Washington State? And I do what I do on the podcast. I didn't ask Ryan. I said, absolutely, we would. and I didn't even know how that worked. We'd never spoke in front of people before. And that was our first big one of our first big notifications that, hey, you're onto something here. And we can't thank you enough, Rob. We really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And, you guys have been great. I mean, I do a lot of travel. I'm on the road all the time. And one thing that's always in my car playing, no matter what, is your show. And it really opened the door to me to look at a lot of other shows. And it's been just a blast to, like I say, to get to know you. And then I get a call one time from you saying, hey, why don't you take your YouTube show and put it onto a podcast? And I was like, what are you talking about? But
I think I did call, didn't I?
You did. I was right in the middle of the car wash. I'm like, yeah, Brian, I'm going to have to call you back because the air dryer is about to turn on.
That's right.
No, Rob, I'll say this, man. When it comes to there's a lot of good content that's coming out now. And I think there's a lot of good people putting some things out. People are talking and they're wanting to talk. The podcast platform, I think, definitely has grown immensely, especially during quarantine. I mean, it was nuts. Brian and I worked very hard during quarantine. We had a lot of material that we were able to put together and whatnot. But, I think ultimately the transition, we just recently talked to Todd Van Beck, and he talks about the transition within funeral service. And I think right now we're in one, when it comes to, just the aspect of funeral service. But I think from a technology standpoint now, we're very much into one now. And I don't know, and where I'm going with this is I don't know if you're getting a lot of this, but we're doing a lot of Facebook Live funerals. We're doing a lot of things now where all the public can enjoy it from some social media platform. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts there, brother?
Well, I know that we've been seeing a lot of out here in Washington. We've been seeing a lot of Facebook Live. We're actually kind of seeing another transition now where people are saying, you know what, let's take this technology and shift it up a gear, shift it up to a higher notch, and maybe look at one of the streaming services. How can we do that in a way that's efficient, in a way that's easy, but in a way that can be added? Because, as nice as Facebook is, as nice as Facebook Live is, it gets buried deep down your timeline. Once you've seen it, and you got to go dig for it. But if you've got a platform where you can actually stream it live, plus it records it, and then add it to your obituary on your website, what a great project to be able to go online to, such and such funeral home, type in the person's name. There's the obituary, there's their life story, and here's the video of whatever service it was that took place. So yeah, today's technology is amazing, and I'm just glad people are starting to really take advantage of that, and getting that into their funeral homes. So yeah, no, absolutely. I
kind of took you off course there. I apologize.
No. I'm good. I like it. I
love derailing the conversation, Rob, as I fight with it.
Well, you did mention something earlier, a minute ago, actually, about Washington, and we got a couple things going on here. And you're right, we have been kind of a trailblazer in a way. We've got these new dispositions that, as of May 1st of this year, 2020, are now legal dispositions, and it's gotten a lot of talk. It's gotten a lot of flack. It's gotten a lot of discussion. It's gotten a lot of, oh my gosh, I would never do that. It's interesting to me. And we actually posed a question on our Facebook page of the difference between disposition and service, and what is it? And it's been fun for me to see these answers come in, because a lot of times they're the same. But what's interesting is that we focus so much on the disposition, and that's what we as funeral providers or funeral professionals are. I think we're our own worst enemy at it in a way. Is we're kind of tripped up over the whole disposition aspect. So what do you guys think? Do you guys see that out where you're at, where people really are focused on disposition as opposed to the service itself?
Ryan, if I could take this for a minute. I've been a licensed funeral director and embalmer here in Indiana for going on 15, 16 years now. And I am just as successful. Big
Sound
words,
it out.
Ryan.
Yeah,
sound it out.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big word there. I see just as much as the national news as anyone else. And what I see in the national news is always forms of disposition. We're talking about generally cremation, but in the past year or two, we've seen natural organic reduction, alkaline hydrolysis, these things that we can do with a body. And we have Thomas Lynch, who says, our job is, to get the dead to where they are, to where they need to be. And that is the essential task that we do as funeral directors and as human beings. But that is, the disposition seems to be the main thing that takes the headline. And that is what seems to be what people are talking about. It's not exactly rocket science what things are doing. You can either bury, burn, blow out of a cannon, or now, dissolve with an alkaline solution, or you can grind down into a compost type material. There are lots of different ways you can remove a body from its current state to whatever state you would like to have it. But I see very little talk about what type of services can be done. And that's, I think, within our profession is completely lacking. We have a lot of talk about funeral celebrants, and that would be in lieu of the clergy, the officiant, and someone who can craft a service that is very personal to the deceased individual and to their family, and they can do some really amazing things there. But outside of the funeral celebrant, we don't see a lot in terms of innovation within the service aspect of funeral service. It's all the media hype is going towards what are we going to do with the body, and I think it comes down to American culture and just the way we think about the dead. And American culture is one of those things that when there's a problem, we want to hire somebody to make that problem disappear. And funeral directors have been sucked into that vacuum of, we're going to call that funeral director. They're going to make the problem disappear. And we're going to do whatever feels right at the time. And that is just kind of the trend that we're, Ryan and I try to do our best to, pull ourselves back and look at this from a bird's eye view. And that's the best we can do. From where we're at with the podcast. It's just to check it out. Ryan, what are you thinking?
Man, I just got to challenge you on this a little bit. The reason it gets the headline is because it's a public health crisis. You just can't have people laying around places. There has to be a process as to get these people where they're supposed to be. That's the reason it gets the headline. Especially right now with what's going on. That's the reason, headlines are headlines, but I'm just saying the reason it gets the attention is because there's an attachment, there's an emotional attachment there, but it is also now questioned within these healthcare people have had to have these conversations now because of what, New York went through with what you went through, Rob. So, I think we've got to think about it that way too. It's important in many different ways. The service, I think you're right, Brian, and everything you said, but I think from a standpoint as to why the disposition gets highlighted so much is because at that point it becomes a public health issue.
Yeah, I could agree with that. And Rob, I don't mean to railroad you here, but as Americans, we definitely seem to see a progression towards more earth-friendly modes of living. And when I say living, that means what we do after death too. And there's definitely a conversation about what is the best thing to do. And it can be argued. Many people will post up on their different sides. As Ryan and I, we're funeral directors, we're embalmers. We will do what the family wishes us to do. We're not going to lobby for any certain form of disposition, any certain form of service. We will talk to you about what you can do. We want to educate you on your options. And then whatever you choose to do, we're happy to help you do that. So we really don't come down on one side of the fence or the other, but we see a lot definitely within the media, some posting up. And when I say posting up, a lot of this I see is, and this is my theory that I've, reiterated time and time again on the podcast. I call it the blowing out your candle theory. You may specialize in burial. Well, I may not. So my goal is to blow out your candle to make mine burn brighter. Mm-hmm. And as a consumer, that frustrates me because we're not really getting factual information there. It's just, I'm going to try to tell everyone how terrible your service is so I can highlight my own. And it just muddies the water for consumers everywhere. But I suppose where I'm going with this is that as Ryan laughs, he always laughs when I just start going off on something, but, as I was saying, that there's an earth-friendly movement out there, and people post up against some of the traditional aspects of funeral directing, and more so, the biggest target within funeral service has been embalming, and embalming is bad for the earth. It is toxic, and one thing we need to remember is the main ingredient within our embalming fluid is organic, right? It's formaldehyde. You and I all of us here that are talking on this podcast, we create 1.5 ounces of formaldehyde every day by just converting carbohydrates into ATP. It's part of natural chemistry. That's what happens. So formaldehyde is a natural chemical. We don't want to downplay its effects, because if you're in a situation to where you're exposed to high amounts of formaldehyde for an excessive amount of time, it can be very, very dangerous. So we take that very, very serious. But as embalmers, we're very well trained in the fact how to reduce our exposure. We have protective equipment. We have ventilators within our prep room. We have all this stuff that can take care of us. Really, the risk is to the embalmer and not the deceased or the general public. In general, we've had, because of the podcast, we've had so many questions come in of, how much formaldehyde is buried in a cemetery? Well, the answer is probably zero, because when you come down to formaldehyde, as soon as it cross-links with a protein, it's not formaldehyde anymore. So there's a lot of myths within funeral service that we see in the media. And it all rolls back into that candle blowing theory of, I want to highlight what I'm doing, so I'm going to tell you what your other option may be bad. And that's just my bottom line. When it comes down to funeral service, you pick what's good for you and your family. But you need good, accurate information. And that's where I'm at.
Something that I've noticed, Ryan
just laughs at me all the time.
It's just amazing. Like, you wanted a rabbit hole to go down, Rob. Like, you started this and you're like,
yeah. Careful what you ask for.
There it was. The controversial topic right there.
Be careful.
That won't get any heat.
You got an answer you didn't ask for, Rob.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed is out here, we've already talked about it. Yes, natural organic reduction. It's here somewhat. It hasn't officially started, even though it's legal, at least as of the recording. We do have alkaline hydrolysis and, of course, burial and cremation. But over the last, let's say, 2 years leading up to May, when this all became legal, the discussions were always, first off, what are these processes? What are these dispositions? And natural organic reduction obviously got the more talk, more looked at by the media, which surprised me because, frankly, I think Washington was maybe number 20 out of 50 states that offer alkaline hydrolysis. Maybe sure. 21, somewhere in there. So it really shocked me. I guess it was maybe just because of that fact that it was a shocking, oh my gosh, you want to do human composting, for lack of better terms. So I think that got a lot of play on it. But I noticed that it got me to thinking, as funeral service providers, we spend a lot of our time talking about disposition and really focusing on disposition. For example, you go to a convention, let's say, or you meet a funeral director somewhere they cross your path somehow. Within 5-10 minutes of the conversation of talking about them, what's the one question that they always ask, or you ask them? What's your cremation rate? We're always focused on that. What is your cremation rate? Now, of course, in Washington, we got to come up with a better question of what's your non-burial rate, or whatever you want to say. But
right.
But the point of it is we focus so much on that, where a better way to do it, I would think, is to say, not what is your cremation rate, because really cremation is disposition. Composting is disposition. Alkaline burial, it's all just disposition. And frankly, as we've seen throughout history, anybody can dispose. It's a disposal of dead human bodies. Whether it's done legally or illegally, anybody can do it.
Right.
It's the service. We're called funeral service professionals, not funeral disposition professionals. And that's where I think the hangup ends up being, is we as providers have, at least what I've heard with these new dispositions, have focused so much on, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to offer that type of service. But why wouldn't you? If that's what's legal in your state and your community is asking for something like that, why wouldn't you provide that as a service to your family?
Ryan, if I may take off, and I'm going to be brief. I promise. I swear I'll be brief.
You're not going to get to chime in at all, Rob.
He's not going to. You're not going to hold your breath on this. Stopwatch. To your exact question, Rob. Ryan and I have had this discussion on the show. Day one, when it's legal, I'm putting it on my price list. It is an option to my families. But to your greater question, though, I actually think that the discussion of disposition more so resonates within funeral service providers, whether it be funeral homes, cemeterians, those who provide alkaline hydrolysis or natural organic reduction. That is where that conversation resonates, and that's where it stays. Because when I sit down and meet with a family, the conversation of disposition is so brief. I may start out with, do you have cemetery property purchased? And that will answer my question for me. They'll say, no, we would like to choose cremation. Now that's my state. So I've got a choice between burial, cremation, or cremation and do something later type of thing, or removal from the state. So I don't have the options that Washington State has. But that little bit of conversation directs me as a funeral director where this conversation goes. And frankly, no matter what their answer is, whether it's burial or cremation, I get that answer and then I move on. Now, what would you like to do before this happens? And I think that conversation with my families is so much more in depth than the conversation that I hear with funeral directors and those providers of disposition, because it's literally such a fraction of my arrangement conference, maybe 90 seconds. I really think this is such an industry specific topic that people just dwell on. When I sit down with a family, it's not that big of a deal. They know what they want for the most part. And from there we move on. And what would you like to do before, or what would you like to do after? Ryan?
Next question, Rob.
Okay. Sorry, Ryan.
Nothing on that one. All right, that's cool. No, it just amazes me because it is, like you said, it is a very small, minute part of that conversation, but it's driven, to me, it's driven by, for lack of better ways of saying it, it's driven by the merchandise that we offer. What type of services does your funeral home provide? And we provide, we show merchandise to show that type of service. And I guess the question becomes is that really providing service by having that much merchandise, or having that merchandise dictate what we provide as service? I know some funeral homes that services, we just had one here recently. In fact, they won they received our Funeral Home of the Year award that we put out. But it was based on a service that they provided. And I don't know all of the details, but a young person passed away, loved camping. They actually turned their chapel into a campground. They had a little campfire going off in it, which, boy, I hope the fire marshal was cool with that, but I don't know how they did. But anyway, listening to the family at the time when we showed up to present this award to this funeral home, listening to the family that was there, that was back at the funeral home describing their loved one's funeral to the public, was just amazing. And to me, it got to thinking, it really isn't about the merchandise. It isn't about any of that, even though that's in our minds, because it's like, maybe because it's a tangible item in our minds, that's what providing service is providing additional merchandise, but it really isn't. It's about how we listen and how we react to what that family's requests are.
I think people just have to understand there's a variety of options. I'm not against any of it. I mean, whatever, if it's legal in the state of Indiana, why wouldn't it be on my price list? So, it is what it is. I mean, we've met enough people and been able to, network, now and talking to people that we know, people that are doing unique things, so we can find a way. I just don't, I think the biggest thing that isn't talked about is the option aspect of it, that, or just that the service before the fact can still happen as well. There's so much more to it. There really is, besides just what we're doing at the end. There's so much more before, and I don't think people realize that, and they're not thinking about that either. The first thing when someone passes away, the first thing people talk about, at least amongst their family, and are we burying or are we cremating? It's not how are we celebrating. Yeah, I hate that cliche word. God, I hate it. Celebrating, but how are we paying tribute to that person? That's not even necessarily thought about. So.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know if it's a mindset. I don't know if it's a generational shift. I will say this. I think our younger generation within funeral service right now are much more accepting of things that are changing and happening,
Absolutely.
Where there are some like, my boss, my father, who may not necessarily understand the idea of natural organic reduction. So, I think there's younger people that are out here that are like, hey, I don't care what the recipe is, but I think we can still do what we need to do here. The recipe doesn't matter. We can figure everything out from a service standpoint, but the disposition, as long as it's legal within your state, yeah, I mean, why not? It'll be on my price list no matter what. So, so I'm going down a rabbit hole there, but yeah, so I just truly believe that, ultimately people don't understand or don't talk about the idea of what happens before it straight into the idea of cremation or burial, at least here in Indiana.
So I asked a question on our Facebook page. And I asked it on a second Facebook page. I asked it on my personal one too. And I prefaced the one on my personal page for all my non-funeral friends, and then repeated the exact same question. And it was this: is there a difference between services and disposition? And please explain your answer. And I got kind of the same answer, which is what I was anticipating from what I call funeral people, all my friends on, Facebook or social media that are within or around funeral. And it was pretty much, yes, there's a difference. Service is what you provide. Disposition is the end result. That made sense. From the non-funeral people, as I call them, my friends that are outside of the profession, that kind of went a different direction. Was services and disposition are kind of tied together, but the question became about finance at some point and option. How much was it, and how many options did they have to choose from? And that was kind of crazy. I got to tell you this though, and if she's listening, I mean no disrespect, but this is my all-time best favorite answer to the question. Again, is there a difference between service and disposition? Please explain your answer. And I had one person that is on the funeral side, funeral friends. Service is what you provide. Disposition is your attitude while providing that service. And that to me was the best answer of the whole thing. And so
wow.
I thought, you know what? That is exactly right, though. Attitude is the disposition. That's what affects the service. And again, the disposition, the physical disposition or body disposition really shouldn't matter if your attitude's about giving service.
I think they're exactly right. To the literal vernacular, yeah, your disposition is what it is, depending on what service you offer. I suppose I would agree. Providing a disposition is providing a service. And, I think funeral directors tend to carve this up cookie cutter wise, that disposition is what it is, and the service is more so of a ceremony that others are invited to or are private. And we tend to wall things off in a box within funeral service. And in general, everything that we do is a service, from answering the phone and acting like a proper human being and giving out general information, or to sitting down with the family and educating them on all their options. Everything that we do is technically a service. And what may differentiate a good service from a bad may be our disposition.
A great way to put it. You've actually said, I don't know, I'm not counting, but at least 2 times you've said the word educate. And I can't express that any better. I think that that's what funeral service providers are, first and foremost, is educators. We have to educate. We have to educate the public. And I think that how you educate the public is where you get what people say is a great funeral director, a good funeral director, and what people say maybe the used car salesman that you hear from families. And it's not that they're a bad person for the most part. It's not that they're bad people. It's just maybe that they haven't figured out how the best way to educate the family. I mean, we have to earn the trust of every family member that walks through our front door. That's our primary goal, is to earn their trust each and every time they walk in. Second to that is we have to be able to educate them. And I think that's where a lot of times, I think that's where that breakdown of this is service, this is disposition comes from, is during that education process, because we spend so much time maybe not educating about the proper services or the different ideas, or even just listening to families express what they wish. We just fall back and kind of go into robot mode and go, well, we've got this many urns, this many caskets, this many whatever, pick one and then tell me where the cemetery is going to be type thing. And I think that's the difference in great funeral directors and, how would you say nicely, not so great.
Yeah. Ryan and I recently had a conversation with a funeral director of 50 plus years that he said, his best recommendation, there is no script to funeral arranging, but he said the best thing he found to do was to make sure you had a box of Kleenex and be ready to listen, and to even ask questions that allowed families to talk. So you had the ability to listen. And that's really what we need to do. Ryan and I have talked about this till we're blue in the face. I mean, our number one job at the beginning is to be liked, because if you don't like the person you're talking to, you're not going to confide in them. You're not going to open up to them. You're not going to even have the opportunity to build trust. And that would be our number two thing, or at least my number two thing, is to be able to build trust with your family. They want to believe what you're saying. And you can't do that with statistics or a pre-programmed conference with a script per se. And you have to be a real human being and meet them on their level. Tom Lynch told us one of the best things that he's ever learned was to sit down with a family and say, "Hi, my name's Tom. I'm the funeral director today. You can ask me anything and I'll give it my best shot." And if you can start to build trust and to be likable, and not in that order, you can start to get somewhere, and you can start to be able to really, really do some good and to help a family through their chances. Ryan?
I think you're right in all aspects, but I think that's easy for us to say in rural communities as well. Because I think the volume load changes that, how funeral directors go about things as well. Sometimes, I mean, Rob, you talked about, I think you talked about maybe the factory aspect of it and becoming numb and just going through the motions. If you're doing, if you're doing, what 2,000 calls a month, I mean, there is that burnout. I mean, we talked to, who was the military gentleman we talked to, Brian?
Oh, I'm going to draw a blank. I'm sorry.
Alcock.
Oh, Andreas Alcock.
He talked about the idea when it comes to veteran services, I mean, when you're doing these things over and over and over and over again and constantly doing them, you start to become a little bit burnout, a little bit numb. I think if you're doing 2,000 calls a month, or a year, a month. Wow. 2,000 calls a year. I think that's pretty significant, so I think sometimes maybe we've got to think about it that way too, with us rural communities, we have the ability to have some time. We've got friends that have, they have 12 to 15 funerals in one day and have a fleet of 7 hearses. So, I mean, I'm trying to give, I guess I'm playing devil's advocate here, Brian. I don't usually do that, but
Well, you're absolutely right, Ryan, because Rob, Ryan and I come from a world where we can spend an hour to 2 to 3 hours with a family making these plans. There are many funeral homes out there that they may only have 90 minutes to make this these funeral arrangements, and they've got to connect with a family very, very quickly. But we've also got to understand that there are funeral providers out there that offer what we call the drive-through lane, to where you will never physically see a funeral director, that you've selected a service. Chances are they're going to be a low-cost service, but we call it the drive-through lane because it is specifically designed to where you don't have to deal with a living human being. That you pick this service, they will pick up your loved one, they will take them to their place of disposition, and you as a family have to get online. You have to do a little bit of homework. You have to fill out the information. Hopefully it's right, because then you got to start all over and do it again if it's not right. But there's a drive-through lane designed for you to keep physically distant from a funeral director, to where you don't feel pressured, to where you don't have that personal interaction. It is very clean cut, and it's very sanitary and sanitized, and it's very budget oriented, but you will not even have that opportunity to ask a question, because your question goes to a voicemail machine. And
Sure.
But many people want that option, and that's why it's there and continues to be there. If people didn't select it, it would disappear overnight.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely all sorts of, whether it's you're doing 2,000 calls a year to 20 calls a year. There's definitely ways to connect or not to connect. Maybe the connection is the fact that it's, you're on the internet. Maybe that's it. The have that availability, though, and as options, is tremendous. I mean, it really puts families in the driver's seat, not to pun off of the fast or the drive-through lane, but it puts them in the driver's seat to make the determination of what they want. Ryan.
Rob, I was writing some things down here, but as we were talking and whatnot, but I think maybe the thought process would be connecting sound it out, Ryan. Connecting to the need. I mean, have we talked about that? Connecting to the need, whatever that need is. I mean, we're connecting to the family to a certain aspect, but aren't we connecting to them and their needs first and foremost?
Well, in a way, to me, I think it kind of goes back to the education of knowing what the need is. And to say that further, a family walks through your door, they might know that they want burial, but that might be all they know. They don't know if they want a viewing. They don't know if they want, and it takes, in my opinion, it takes somebody or some way, I should say, not necessarily somebody, but some way to provide and educate them with the options that are currently out there. And so, if they don't know, well, it's like your hat that you're wearing, which if you're listening to the podcast, you won't see it, but if you watch the YouTube, you will. You don't know what you don't know. A very true statement when it comes to funeral service.
And we're going to give those props out right now to Carrie Northey, funeral director in Michigan. This is some of her merch, so thought I'd throw that out. Undertaking the Podcast has their own merch as well. But yes, I try to support those that also are trying to do good things within funeral service. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think connecting to the need, that's a different conversation. I don't know, Rob, but I think even when the people don't know what the need is, as we explain the options, we soon find out what that need transpires to be. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I've never heard it put that way. Maybe that's a podcast first. I don't know, but maybe connecting to the need. I mean, I don't know. Just a thought.
Well, and you can go back to kind of what we said previously too, with the connecting to the need doesn't necessarily mean we've got 50 caskets to show you or 50 urns to show you. It might be that we have 5 caskets and 5 urns and, shotgun shells and whatever. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's so much stuff out there that we're saying is connecting to families now. There's so many opportunities out there, but really kind of backtrack that a little bit. It boils down to merchandise again of here's your options. Let me show you your service that's available. Here's the options that go with it, but it's all surrounding merchandise. And the question, I guess, is merchandise really service, or does it drive the service?
Rob,
I
I would almost say traditionally within funeral service, it has driven the service. That there are so many funeral directors, thousands upon thousands of funeral directors that have been in a way brainwashed by, the casket companies will hate to hear this, but in a way brainwashed by the casket companies that if you do not sell a casket, or if you do not sell a nice casket, well, then this funeral is less than good.
Yeah.
And that's not the world that I have grown up in, although I've been surrounded by older funeral directors that literally only talk about the funeral based on the casket sale that they had. And as I've grown within funeral service, I've seen other products try to creep in and steal that market share from the casket companies. And we as funeral directors are caught in the middle of what do we offer to our families, because there are so many options that if we start going through, here's the thing, we've always been told that we offer every option to every family every time, but after we get through option 8, families start, their eyes glaze over, they're tired of hearing it, they're being sold to. It's all product based. And what they really want is a human being to listen to them. And that is what has been so hard for us newer, younger generation funeral directors to disconnect from, is the actual product from the service. And unfortunately, when we talk about innovation within funeral service, it's either 100%, well, I can't even, math is hard, Ryan. It's either all product based or it's all disposition based. It is so rarely the acts that we go through or the discussions that we have, and that's why I feel this podcast is so important, that we do this Undertaking the Podcast, because I have learned within 2 years and over 200 episodes so many different ways to explain what we do as funeral directors to our families. From Verney Fountain to say, as infants, we have been trained to say hello and goodbye. And as adults, if we do not get the chance to say goodbye, then there's something missing. I've already talked about the Thomas Lynch quote, to the Todd Van Beck quote that says that, human nature and societies, will bury or dispose of their dead in a direct reflection of how they live their lives. And this stuff only comes up through conversation and really wrapping our brains around why we're even here as funeral directors. And that's what really drives me.
Yeah. How about it, Ryan?
Great talk, Brian. Great talk.
We can let Ryan talk now.
Next question, Ron. Man alive.
Well, no, I'm excited about it. It's something that's really been on my thoughts a lot. I
don't even remember the question, honestly. I don't even remember.
What was it again? So the question, is there a difference between service and disposition? And I want to kind of wrap up or start to wrap up with actually the conversation that came from the non-funeral, my non-funeral friends, and talk about them a little bit, because these guys are not in the profession at all. They're not anything to do with it. They are our customers. They are our clients. They are the people that we serve. And the difference between the service and disposition, what I found in the majority, was it really came down to how we educate people, primarily, how we listen to people, and how we provide for them what it is that they're asking for us. And if they don't know how to ask it, that we have enough wherewithal to, through the listening that we've done, to figure out what it is that they're asking us for and be able to provide that. A prime example was family walks in and, do you want to have viewing? No. Okay. Are you going to have a service? No. You're going to have a funeral? No. We're going to have just cremation. Okay, great. What are you going to do after the cremation? Well, we're going to have a gathering. Well, isn't that a funeral? To the family, though, the question was, no, it's not a funeral, because there's no casket, there's no viewing, there's no church, there's no this. But they're going to have, and this was something, this I'm using as a pre-COVID, pre-restriction on gatherings. But, they ended up with 150 people that showed up for this non-service. And they had everything that a service would have, except a funeral director to help direct and guide the funeral. And that kind of lent itself back to kind of the ideas I was getting from my non-funeral friends on, is there a difference? It came down to price and merchandise once again, of is that merchandise worth spending the money for to have the service that I think I want? And so it was interesting. It's been kind of an interesting question, because I got 3 different answers from 3 different groups of people that all tried to answer the same question.
Ryan, take it away.
No, I don't know, man. I think when it comes to service, I don't dictate what the value is to somebody. I mean, if somebody, there's people that could go down to the Lions Club and rent out a room at the Lions Club building and do what they want. You know what I mean? It depends on how much you want to do, and I think there is value in not having to worry. There's a reason I pay a certain amount of money for certain things, so I don't have to worry or deal with them. You know what I mean? There's services that are provided. I mean, there's no question about that. Do you want to be 100% involved and in control of every aspect? Yeah, sure. I mean, there's places that can abide by those needs that you want to make you feel comfortable within your journey. That's not everybody's journey, man. What I'm saying is quite honestly, if somebody wants to go through the funeral service aspect of things and trying to think of the right way to put this, Rob. Give me just a second here, because I want to be careful. I want to be very careful as to how I go about it. There's, it always goes back to that Ghostbusters quote, right? Who are you going to call? Mm-hmm. There's somebody you can call if you don't want to deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. It's just like anything else. Who are you going to call? So people can do whatever they want. It's all about value, how you find value. There's things we can do at the funeral home. There's things we can do to help with certain aspects, tributes. If you want to have a traditional service, that's great. We can move through that process. If you don't want to do that and you want to do something later, we can do that as well. It just depends on the family, and I guess as to what they find value in. If they find value in not having to worry about it and us dealing with it, that's fine. Okay, that's what we do. That's our job.
That's a really good point, Ryan. I'm going to touch on 2 of those if you allow me, Rob. I mean, I know it's like almost midnight.
I almost got lost in my conversation. I don't know if you saw that. I almost got lost. I really had to bring it back in there.
I was trying to let you go. I mean, since it's almost midnight here, and I know we're about ready to wrap, but there are two really important points there that Ryan brought up that I just wanted to touch on. That the first thing is like, I don't care what you call it. You can call it a funeral. You can call it a celebration of life. You can call it a gathering of family and friends. You can call it a kegger. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a funeral. Mm-hmm. And I've had families sit across from me, and really one family in particular, that this gentleman who, well, he was a close connection to the funeral home. They'd outlived all their friends. And he said, I don't want to have a funeral. We've outlived everybody. And his son looked at him and he said, Dad, do you want to have one funeral or do you want to have 100? And it kind of made me shake my head as a funeral director. I'm leaning in, listening, because I want to hear what this is about. And he goes, Dad, you can either have one funeral for 2 hours, or you can have one every time you go to the grocery, or every time someone sees you out in public, because you did not give your community the opportunity to support you. And I'm sitting there with my jaw on the floor as a funeral director of 15 years going, how the hell didn't I think of this? But a great point. So we went from no services to a short gathering for about 2 hours. So as Americans, I think we get tied up on the language. We are always trying to find new words to soften the blow, because funeral funerals suck. They're sad, right? So we want to get away from that sad. So we have a celebration of life, and we call it a celebration. And then everybody shows up and everybody's sad. So then we have a gathering of family and friends. Next thing you know, it turns into a kegger. It is what it is. But when it comes down to the value of what we do and how we support people, it does come down to that education thing. But what the true value of funeral services on Christmas morning, on Thanksgiving morning, when you need help, who are you going to call? You can call the church. You'll get an answering machine. You can call the bank. You can call the insurance company. You'll get an answering machine. But you call the funeral home and you'll get Ryan and he'll say, I'll be right there. Or you can call Brian and he'll say, I'll be right there. And we'll leave our family and we'll say, sorry, guys, wait for me or go ahead without me. And we come to your family and we do it for, and this is the thing I call it within funeral service. The most affordable thing in funeral service is the removal of remains, the local removal of remains. And that's the pickup of your loved one from where they died to bring them into our care is the most affordable thing you can possibly purchase from a funeral director. Ryan, go ahead.
No, I think, Todd Van Beck, brings up the idea of, just what a noble journey that is. We have such a high responsibility in what we do. So, that's all I wanted to bring into play there.
Well, I would agree with both of you. I think that we definitely do have a very high responsibility. We are the only ones that will get up out of bed at 3 a.m., Christmas morning, whatever, and we will come. We'll put our own lives on hold, our own family's lives on hold, so that we can come and serve your family. And the best part about it is, for lack of a better term, we volunteered for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, we'll get a paycheck, hopefully. But
the expenses don't stop coming, Rob. I mean, it's still going to come down the pipe,
The point of it, though, is that we volunteered for this. We could have been race car drivers. We could have been, doctors. We could have done anything. We chose a profession that said we want to provide service. And that's kind of was the whole point of that question of what is the difference between, and it goes back to being a funeral service provider, not a funeral disposition provider. And I'm not, I'm not disrespecting anybody for what they're doing. I think everybody has a part in funeral service that is full-fledged funeral home to immediate disposition companies, whatever you want to call them. I think they all have a very valuable part. And my thought on it, which is there really isn't a difference between service and disposition. And it really goes back to that question of the disposition. And that's why it was my favorite answer. The disposition is the attitude that you have while providing the service.
That's a brilliant answer.
It was awesome. I loved it. I was so shocked by it. But I responded with, that was my favorite answer of all time. And I think it's true. I think that, we volunteered to do this for your family. That's because we want to serve you. We want to serve our community. And, we need to if you're getting to that point of it's just service or it's just disposition, we need to get to the point of it's all together. And, we need to not burn out. And if we do burn out, we need to figure out a way to not burn out, whatever that might be.
Rob, it all starts with dialogue, buddy, and having the conversations like we're doing right now, man. So just FYI, I think, we've got to have these conversations with individuals and just people within funeral service. So I think they help. I think they provide, a lot of knowledge to the public as well as to, I think people are curious as to what we do. I really, truly believe that. I think they are curious. And I think these conversations, this type of content, it only helps the general public when it comes to transparency as well. So,
yeah. Rob, thanks for having us on, buddy. I know it's late
Absolutely.
for us. It's kind of late for you. I just
wanted
wanted to point.
Eyes, Brian, but
I know. I wanted to point out before we go, though, right here back on my wall underneath, and get my finger right. It's backwards. Right here on my wall, 2020 member of the Washington State Funeral Directors Association. Rob, is it about renewal time over?
It's
for you
just
guys?
about another 2 weeks.
Hey, you can't do
2
it.
weeks.
You got to do
I'll
it.
I'll send you a Sharpie so you can cross the 2020 out and put 2021 on it.
That's how we renew.
That's cheaper than printing a new certificate.
Pointed right there. I'm pointing right at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, listen, guys, I can't tell you how excited I am to do this with you. I want to thank you as well, both of you, because I mentioned it at the beginning. You are an inspiration to me. Listening to you guys, and I know you joke about the rabbit holes and things like that, but to me, it digs deep into the conversation. And that's, Ryan, you mentioned it. It's all about the conversation. It's all about the listening. You guys got to plug a few people. I'm going to plug our show, Member Talks. Our tagline is join the conversation. And that's really what this is all about, joining in the conversation and being a part of it. So thank you guys for coming out and doing this with us. And, I can't wait to get together with you again sometime in the near future.
Hey, thanks, buddy.
All right.
Rock and roll, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you win twice. You've done that to me one other time, Rob. You're not winning this time, buddy. Rock and roll.
I was so excited.
Oh,
so excited.
You stole Rob's rock and roll.
Yeah, the first time I came on your show, I caught you on that one. And I still remember that look of, oh, my gosh, did he just use my line?
Yeah, I win. I win, buddy.
All right. Well, we're even. We're going to have to do this again and see who the tiebreaker is.
Anytime, Rob.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
See you soon.
Good night.